Okay, so last time we lost the first half of the recording. For those I think everybody here was here, but there are a bunch of people who only listen to recordings. I want to summarize just in 5 minutes what we saw. We're looking at Deutero-Isaiah, which is the second half of the book of Isaiah, from a prophet who lived at the time that the Jewish people in exile, Babylonia, are permitted by Cyrus, the Persian king who conquered Babylonia, to return. And the book begins with very famous words, Nachamu, Nachamu Ami. It's God's telling the prophet to comfort God's people. The payment for their sins has been made, uh, and they are being allowed now to return home. And we have this beautiful imagery at the beginning of Isaiah where a voice is proclaiming, you know, build a road in the wilderness, flatten the mountains, raise up the hills. This will be a triumphant return for God's people to to the land of Israel. Um, Though it's not here, elsewhere we get this image. Jeremiah, when they go into exile, talks about it. And it's actually a haftarah that we read. Talks about Rachel weeping for her children because when they leave, they pass Bethlehem, and outside of Bethlehem is Rachel's tomb. And now, as they return, we have an image of, not in this Haftarah, in this Torah board, but elsewhere, of Rachel rejoicing, as her children now have returned home. So that is the opening theme. And now what we're turning to, and we get some language about God power, God as the creator. And we'll see much more of that now. And I'm going to pick up a little bit before we ended last time. Let me just share my screen. Okay, so we get this image here. This is verse 11. I think that I went through to around 15 last time. And we get this, here's the Hebrew. Kiroe edro, yireh bizaro. Like a shepherd who pastures his flock, God gathers up lambs, carries them in an embrace, in bechelko, in his God's bosom, he carries them and leads or drives the mother sheep. So this idea of God as a shepherd is something that we're, I think, very familiar with. Of course, we have that, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want, the Psalms. And this is an image, first of all, it's very pastoral. It's an image of concern. The shepherd who guides the flock, who is concerned about their well-being, who protects them from enemies, right? The shepherd is the one when animals come to prey on the flock, the shepherd's job is to protect them, to deliver, to drive off predators, and also to make sure that they go on the right path, right? Leading them to pasture, to water. And so this sense of God nurturing, protecting, and also leading us on the way. Here, the imagery, of course, in this chapter is God who's triumphantly leading us back to our land. But there's another, I think, echo here, and that is that there is a path that we are meant to follow, and God is the one who leads us on that path. And when we stray from that path, God is the one who brings us back. The Hebrew word for a sin, one of them is an averah, or it's in Yiddish avera. It's an avera, and an avera literally means to stray off, right? La'avor, to go around or to go off the path. And of course, the path is the place where you walk. And the Hebrew word for Jewish law is halakha, the pathway. And so we get this image of a shepherd who also has a path for us. And when we stray, brings us back to that path. The other thing, the words kiroe edro, like a shepherd with his flock, this particular passage, of course, we know also these words from Unetana Tokef. It is the prayer that we say on the high holidays when we talk about God like a shepherd leading the flock and using exactly kiroe edro, probably in allusion to this passage in that piyut, in that poem, which is chanted on the high holidays. And now we get this imagery of God as really in the creator, enormous power. So who measured the waters with a hallow's hand? Waters here has two different meanings. Here it is mayim and shamayim. There's a sense, if you go back to Genesis and you look at the description of the creation of the world, there are upper waters and lower waters. God separates the waters, and in the upper waters, God places a barrier holding the waters above, which is called a rakia. And above the rakia are shamayim, are the sky. So here we have God measures out the waters, gauges the skies with a span, meted out earth's dust with a measure, weighed the mountains with a scale, and the hills with a balance. So here we have this image of God as the craftsman who creates the universe. This is, of course, very different from the imagery in Genesis, where it's all by speech. Baruch Shamar v'haya olam, blessed be the one who spoke and brought the world into being. As God says, let there be light and let the waters gather and so on. But the imagery here, I think, in Isaiah is very deliberate because we're going to see another craftsman now, unlike God, an earthly craftsman. And this is really setting us up for that image. And now we say, who can plumb the mind of God? The Hebrew is ruach, the spirit. So who can understand God's mind, God's spirit, God's plan? And then we get, and I talked about this at length last time, who did God consult? Who bestowed understanding, provided guidance in the way of right? The answer, we have these rhetorical questions, and the answer, of course, is no one. Who guided God and who made known the path of wisdom? There is no one else. This is pure monotheism. God alone does. And I mentioned that we, again, in Genesis, we have this idea as God says, let us make man in our image, at least according to Rashi and other very traditional commentators, God is consulting with the angels. But here, Isaiah will have none of it. Isaiah is an absolute monotheist, and therefore, no, God could not have consulted, would not have consulted, because God, no one can understand God's mind. And now we get this image. The nations are but a drop in the bucket. There are, of course, these expressions in English which are borrowed from the Bible. This is certainly one of them, reckoned as dust on a balance. Before, we had this image of God who meted out the earth's dust with a measure, right? weighing the mountains with a scale. And now we're turning it around and we're talking about how to God the nations are but a drop in the bucket and on a balance. So you see the poetic quality of this. The word here, it's a drop in the bucket. That's classically how it's translated into English. The Hebrew is mar, kimar, like mar. The word mar usually is understood as bitterness, right? Just as like maror, which is eaten on Passover, bitter herbs. Um, and Rashi, in his attempt to understand it, says, well, at the bottom of the bucket, there is this residue which is left, this sort of smudge of dirt or whatever substance it is, which would be bitter. Another classic commentary, Ibn Ezra, simply says this word has only one occurrence in this kind of form. It is unique, hypox legomena, meaning it only appears once in Scripture, and therefore hard to know what the meaning is. Um, so the nations are but a drop in the bucket. They're like dust. Of course, dust is nothing. One doesn't worry about dust on a balance, right? A scale where you would weigh things because they really have no impact. The very coastlines, this is the ends of the earth are lifted like God could just lift them up. Lebanon is not fuel enough, nor its beasts enough for sacrifice. So here in Lebanon, we're really thinking about the mighty cedars of Lebanon, these enormous trees, uh, spectacular, really, and so much so that they get imported from Lebanon by Solomon in order to build the temple. Here, there are these vast forests in Lebanon. There is not fuel enough, nor animals enough to sacrifice to God. Now, here, it's not, the idea is if you were to make a sacrifice appropriate to God's greatness, there would never be enough fuel. There would never be enough animals to sacrifice, right? This is an anti-sacrifice per se. And it's very reminiscent of in the morning prayer service. There's a section on Shabbat morning where we say, even if there's a variety of comparisons. We could be fleet, we could be verbal, even if we could do all these things, we could never adequately express through our prayers. We could never adequately express God's greatness. All the nations are like nothing in God's sight, less than nothing. And now, to whom can I compare you? What form can I make comparison? And here he begins now his diatribe against making an image of God. Nothing could compare to God. And what we're really talking about here is idolatry. And we get a condemnation now of idolatry. And we're going to see this throughout Isaiah. Now, it's important to understand Isaiah is character. He is, what's the word I want? He's kind of making fun of idolatry, but in the way he does it, he's not really. Idol worshipers don't believe that the idols are God. They are a place in which God could become their God, can become manifest and accessible, but they are not gods. And I think it's important to point that out because sometimes, people think that, well, you're worshiping an idol, it's really a god. You believe it's a god. And Isaiah will characterize them as making gods, but they're really not making gods from their point of view. They are making a place where their God is accessible, where their God can settle. And in fact, there are, you make a variety of these idols, and then God can be apparent in any or all of them. And in some ways, it's a little bit like, um, though you should never make such a comparison, it's a little bit like the Mishkan in the wilderness, right? Because it is a place where God comes to dwell and where God is accessible. But Isaiah wants to characterize them. He says, can you ever make a form for God? The idol, a woodworker shaped it, a smith overlaid it with gold, forging links of silver. A gift, someone chooses mulberry or wood that does not rot. He seeks a skillful woodworker to make a firm idol that will not topple. And then here, don't you know? Haven't you heard? Haven't you been told from the very first? Have you not discerned how the earth was founded? And there's a sense here, again, Isaiah using these rhetorical questions, but there's a sense it should be obvious. Anyone can see this. There is a sense that idolatry is foolishness. Okay, and it is God. So the question is, haven't you heard all these things? It is God who is enthroned above the vault of the earth. And the Hebrew here is Hayoshev al Hug Haaretz. A hug is a circle. Um, and the Chagim, the Hebrew word Chag, which we use for pilgrimage festivals, are called Chag in part because what happens on a pilgrimage festival, you go up and you return. So it's in a sense like a circle. So as I was preparing, I thought to myself, wait, so do they see the earth? Does Isaiah see the earth as round? I thought that people only understood that in the Middle Ages. But apparently, that's not true at all. The Greeks knew that the earth was round. People knew that the earth was around for a very long time. Anyway, God is above Hug Haaretz and above, and the inhabitants are like grasshoppers. God looks down from on high. You get this image of going in an airplane and looking down, except here they look down and we are just bugs. We are grasshoppers. Isaiah is undoubtedly aware of the image in the book of Numbers. Remember the scouts that get sent out uh, by Moses, and they are to look into the promised land, come back and bring a report. Moses is hoping that this will be a PR program. They'll go in, they'll see all the good things, and they'll come back and with words of encouragement to the people. But it backfires, and they come back and they say, these scouts, there are giants in the land, and we appear to them like grasshoppers. So God is high on, he spreads out skies like gauze, stretches them like a tent, brings potentates to naught, rulers as nothing. And then here we get this image. Hardly are they planted, hardly are they sown, hardly has their stem taken root, when God blows upon them and they dry up and the storm bears them off like straw. All of these powerful figures, they may rise up, but God just blows them away. To whom can you liken me, says God? To whom can I be compared? And then we get this more imagery about God as the creator. Lift high your eyes and see who created these. So look high, there's a sense of looking to the skies, the one who sends out their host by count, who calls them each by name, given such great might and vast power, no one fails to appear. So here, this image is that you look up to the heavens and you'll see, the sun, the moon, and the stars. God knows them all. God can call them to appear before God, and no one would fail to show up. Okay, and I'm going to stop here for a bit. And why did I do that? Oh, because I don't know why. Let's try to stop my share. There we are. Okay. Questions, comments about any of this imagery in Isaiah? Any thoughts on shepherds and idols and God's enormous power? Yeah, so.
It doesn't go as far as Ecclesiastics, but it's Hakol Hevel. Everything is vanity
Yes, yes.
compared to God.
Yeah, I think it is right. I Ecclesi there is a sense in Kohelet, there's a sense of nothing matters, right? That's really what Kohelet is saying. It doesn't matter, nothing matters, all is vanity, all is nothingness, right? He is despondent. Here, there is a sense of nothing compares to God. It's a little bit different. I can understand why you would see it, but I think the emphasis is different. Any other comments or thoughts? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to mention also what you were talking about before, uh, that the prayer that we were saying about who's equal to God, who can be compared to God. That's in Nishmat before Shochenai
Yeah,
and Shabbat Mor.
that's exactly what I was referring to.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. Okay, so back to Isaiah, and we will. Okay, I don't know why I got this. Let me see if I can get rid of it. There we go. Okay. Now, and now, there we go. Okay. So, why do you say, Jacob? Why do you declare, O Israel, my way is hidden from God, my cause is ignored by God? So, here the idea is, why are you despairing? Nistara darki, may Adonai, my way is hidden. Um, Obviously, God sees all. Why should you say that? But there is a sense, not that if you particularly in the book of Deuteronomy, not that Jacob, that God doesn't know where Jacob is, but there is a sense in Deuteronomy that God can deliberately hide God's face from Jacob. Not that God doesn't know where he is, but we get this idea of Hester Panim. How can bad things happen? God has turned away. Um, but God knows, and Jacob's cause is not ignored. Don't you know? How haven't you heard? The eternal is God from of old, the creator of heaven, of earth from end to end, who never grows faint or weary, whose wisdom cannot be fathomed. So you might think that you're being ignored, but really God, it's simply that you can't understand the ways of God. That there is an answer to why bad things happen, but you can't see it. You can't understand it. Um, and I would go so far as to say, from the human point of view, whatever the answer is, it's not really adequate for us. But God's ways are not known. This idea that God does not grow faint or weary, um, and we see this in Psalms too. God doesn't sleep. God doesn't grow faint or weary. Very famously, we have this showdown between Elijah and the priests of Baal, uh, in the book of Samuel. It's really a fantastic scene as uh, Elijah, who is the last of the prophets, now goes against the priests of Baal, and he taunts them. It's set up in such a way that they offer sacrifices, and Isaiah is saying, well, maybe your God is sleeping, maybe your God is off doing what he needs to do. There's almost a sense that your God is in the bathroom. He says, maybe you should shout louder, maybe he will hear. And here in Isaiah, we get this sense God is not like that. God is eternal. God knows all. God created everything. God never grows faint. Um, God is the one who gives strength to the weary, vigor to those who are spent. Youth may grow faint and weary, young men stumble and fall. Um, but those who trust in God renew their strength. As eagles grow new plumes, they shall run and not grow weary. They shall march and not grow faint. And here, this image is actually a common belief in antiquity that eagles molt, and when they get rid of their old feathers, they are renewed. And so here he's saying, if you trust in God, God will renew your strength. And I think here the image is both personal, but much more significantly for Isaiah, it is about the people as a whole. The people who are weary, who have been suffering, who have been in Babylonian exile, and God will renew their strength. And now we move on to chapter 41. Stand silent before me, coastlands. Let nations renew their strength. Again, picking up on that image. Let them approach and state their case. Let us come forth together for argument. So he says, you can come and you can make your claims to me. And now you get this very unusual, cryptic statement. Who brought, it says a victor, but here the Hebrew is actually Tzedek, a righteous one who called from the east, summoned him to God's service. So in the context of Isaiah, this means Cyrus. He is the one who came from the east, from Persia, who comes and is summoned now to God's service, has delivered nations to him, and trodden sovereigns down, has rendered their swords like dust, their winds like windblown straw, right? Cyrus, who defeats the Babylonian Empire. But Rashi actually says, no, this is an allusion to Abraham. Which doesn't make a lot of sense in the context, but it's kind of interesting. Abraham, who was called to God's service, and comes from the east, from Ur, and has traveled. God summoned him, go and to the land that I will show you, right? And then delivered nations to him. We get um, the war in Genesis. Remember that Abraham's nephew Lot is taken captive, and he goes to war against these kings. Um, so again, I don't think it's what it means, but it's clever. It's a clever interpretation that you'll find in Rashi. Um, God pursues them, but God is untouchable. Who has wrought and achieved this? The one who announced the generations from the start. So here we get this theme also through Isaiah that God foresees everything that will happen. Um, we see this clearly in the Torah when God appears to Abraham, the covenant between the pieces, and God delivers this message to Abraham, he's giving him the land, but they won't be able to inherit it right away. He says, your descendants will be strangers in a land not theirs, but they will go forth with great wealth, and they will eventually come back to this place, to the land of Israel. And there, of course, we're talking about oppressed and enslaved in that land. That's, of course, Egypt, going forth with wealth and ultimately coming back here. So this idea that God foresees all, God knows and God plans everything. So it was God's plan that Israel, from the beginning, that Israel would go into Babylonian exile, and it was God's plan that Cyrus would defeat Babylonia and that they would come back. The coastlands look in fear, the ends of the earth tremble, craftsmen grow near and come. Each one helps the other, saying to his fellow, take courage. And here we get these images of, again, idolaters. The woodworker encourages the smith who flattens with the hammer, encouraged him who pounds the anvil, saying of the riveting, it is good, and he fixes it with nails that it may not topple. Okay, all of that is for naught, but you, Israel, my servant, my chosen one, seed of Abraham. And here, this is a beautiful Abraham, my friend, Ohavi, my beloved. You who I drew from the ends of the earth and I called from its far corners, to whom I have said, now you are my servant. I chose you, I have not rejected you. So you were sent into exile, but I did not reject you. You are a descendant of Abraham. You are my servant, and therefore don't be afraid. I am with you. Don't be frightened. I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you, uphold you with my victorious right hand. Shamed and chagrined will be those who contend with you, who strive with you, shall be naught and shall perish. You may seek, but shall not find those who struggle against you. There won't be enemies. Nothing less than nothing shall be those who battle against you. For I, the Eternal, who grasp your right hand, who say to you, have no fear, I will be your help. This idea that I will be your redeemer, I will be your help, all of this language, don't be afraid, as God says to Abraham, don't be afraid. All of this is a reframing of what we see in Genesis. And now we get this really odd phrase, don't be afraid. Jacob, people of Jacob, the men of Israel, who are a worm, and I will help you. I am your Redeemer, the Holy One of Israel. So the idea that the people of Israel a worm is really odd and seems out of place in this prophecy, which is talking about how special Israel is, how Israel is God's servant, how God, has chosen Israel, and now Israel is a worm. So one way of reading this is that they are thought of by the other people as a worm, that they're insignificant, that they're before we got the image of grasshoppers, actually back in the book of Numbers, they see themselves as grasshoppers, and perhaps here they see themselves as worms. But forget about that. Don't be afraid. In a sense, you're not a worm. I will help you. I, your Redeemer, the Holy One of Israel. And do do and I just want to find this here. Kadosh Yisrael. God calls himself throughout Isaiah Kadosh, or the Holy One, right? And this is also tied to the idea that God is unique. The idea of Kadosh or Kedusha at its root is separateness, uniqueness, different, unlike other things. So when we talk about God as being Kadosh Yisrael, we're talking about a being which is separate and unique. I will make of you a threshing board, a new thresher with many spikes, and you will thresh mountains to dust and make hills like chaff. So you don't worry. In fact, you will have enormous power. You will winnow them, and the wind will carry them off. A whirlwind shall scatter them. You will rejoice in God and glory in the Holy One of Israel. The poor and needy seek water, and there is none. Their tongue is parched with thirst. I will respond to them. I, the God of Israel, will not forsaken them. I will open up streams on the bare hills and fountains among the valleys. I will turn the desert into ponds, the arid land into springs of water. So we get this imagery, also known to us from the Torah. God is the one who provides water. And God will make sure that though you seem to have none, God will provide it for you. I will plant cedars in the wilderness, acacias and myrtles, setting cypresses in the desert, box trees and elms, that all may see and know, consider and comprehend that God has done this, the Holy One of Israel has done this. Submit your case, offer your pleas, let them approach and tell us what happened, what will happen, tell us what has occurred, and we will take note of it or announce to us what will occur that we may know the outcome. Foretell what is yet to happen, that we may know that you are God's. Do anything good or bad that we may be awed and see. Right? So all of this is directed against the so-called pagan gods, right? State your place. Tell us what will happen and what has happened, right? So this idea that God can do this, but they can't do this. Announce to us what will occur. Foretell that we may know that you are God's. Show yourself to be God's. Do anything, good or bad, that we may be awed and see. You are less than nothing. Your effect is less than nullity. One who chooses you is an abomination, right? So I have roused him from the north, and he has come from the sunrise, one who invokes my name. and he has trampled rulers like mud, like a potter treading clay, who was foretold this from the start that we may note it, uh, from aforetime that we might say, you are, right? No one foretold, no one announced, no one has uttered. For things once predicted to Zion, behold, they are. Right? This I predict, this was predicted, and it is. And again, I send a herald to Jerusalem. But I look, and there is none can predict or can respond when I question them. They are nothingness. Their works are nullity. Their statues are naught and nil. We're going to return to here. And again, we get this image that these other gods are insignificant. They are nothing. And this emphasis on predicting that God knows things that seem to happen aren't just happening. God knew they were happening. God predicted that they would happen because God is in total control. Questions or comments about these ideas? I know it's a lot of repetition, and this is probably, it's not as though Isaiah got up once and spoke for 6 hours again and again, but these are undoubtedly a variety of different prophecies that were put together, that were edited together. And I think that's certainly part of the reason why there is this seeming repetition. Um, the idea of idolatry, I mean, Isaiah is speaking to a people who are returning now to the land of Israel. And their great sin was idolatry. And so we get this, look, look what's happened to you. I did this for you, right? And you think those idols, I mean, it's not like he's worried about the Persian idols, right? All of this is this sense, and we see this in the Torah again and again, that the idolatry is a snare that will lead the people astray, right? And so this case that Isaiah is making, on the one hand, he is saying, I have chosen you. I care for you. Look, I'm bringing you home, right? Well, on the other hand, as Moses was worried at the end of his life, as the people were about to go into the promised land, here Isaiah speaking to this people about to return to the promised land is also deeply concerned about idolatry. And I think that really is the reason that these themes keep recurring. Any other thoughts? I'm going to do a little bit more. And we're going to be now finished with Isaiah. There's a lot more we could do, but next week is our last session, and I want to talk about Shavuot. I'll talk about that in a minute. No, we're still in recording. That's not what I wanted to do. I want to go to share. Okay. This is my servant who I uphold, my chosen one who I delight. I put my spirit upon him. He shall teach the true way to nations. So this idea, right? I put my ruach on him, mishpat lagoyim yotze. He will teach the true way. Here, mishpat is usually used as justice. In other words, the true way is the just way. So here we have this sense, what does it mean to be chosen? On the one hand, God delights in us, right? We have a special relationship. God cares about us. But our role is, what it means to be chosen is to teach the way, the true way of behavior, the Torah, in fact, to the nations. And we get also a bit later the idea that the people of Israel are meant to be or Lagoyim, a light onto the nations. So we have, and in Exodus, we are told why did God brought us to God, and we are Mamlechet Kohanim, B'goy Kadosh, a nation of priests. So what's the role of the priest? It is to bring the sacrifices to God, the sacrifices which are being brought by the people. In other words, the priest's role is, in a sense, to bring the people closer to God. We are, according to Exodus, Mamlechet Kohanim, a nation of priests. So all of this is, and people say, oh, the chosen people, it means that we're better than others. And there's no sense of that here. We have a close relationship with God, but we have a job to do. And that job is to be an example to other nations by the way that we live, and that they should emulate that, and that we should teach them the way of justice and law. He shall not cry out or shout aloud or make his voice heard in streets. He will not break even a bruised rod or snuff out a dim wick. He will bring forth the true way. Again, mishpat. He will not grow dimmed or bruised till he has established the true way on earth, and the crossroads will await his teaching. Now, this also, you can read this not as the servant, the chosen one. You can read it as Israel, and I think that's, given the overall context, the one who God delights in, the people of Israel. But you can also read this in a messianic way, that God is talking here not about Cyrus, the Messiah, but the ultimate Messiah, right? Now, Isaiah doesn't seem to talk that way. When Isaiah makes messianic claims, he seems to be talking about Cyrus, but this idea that the world awaits his teaching, right, certainly can be read that way. And it can be read as a messianic passage. And as I've said, a lot of Isaiah is read, as messianic predictions, and to the extent that it's being read by the Christian community as predicting Jesus's messianic rule. Thus says the eternal God, who created the heavens and stretched them out, who spread the earth and what it brings forth, who gave breath to the people and life to those who walk on. And the answer is Ani. I, God, in my grace have summoned you. I've grasped you by the hand. I created you, appointed you. And here we get exactly that language, right? Right. Here it is. A light to those who are Yoshvei Choshech, who are dwelling in darkness, opening the eyes deprived of light, rescuing prisoners from confinement, from the dungeon, those who sit in darkness. I am God, Ani Adonai. I am God, Hushami. And this use of Adonai as God's name, as it were, God is not a personal, but it is God's personal name, one which expresses more than anything God's essence. And it is a form of the verb to be. There is no present in Hebrew. You can only say something was or something will be. You can't say, there's no, in a sense, it is the verb of being, and God is being. If you want to, you could read it that way. I am Adonai. I will not yield my glory to another or my renown to idols. And again, we see things that once predicted have come, and now I foretell new things and announce to you how they will sprout up. I'm going to stop here. Okay, this light of the nations idea. Any comments or thoughts? Yeah, Viola.
I have a question. I'm confused about something. You were mentioning Cyrus a lot. I thought they were referring to Elijah.
No, 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 no. So Elijah takes place much, much earlier. Cyrus is this is after the time of the Babylonian exile,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
So Elijah is active during the period of kings, Elijah the prophet. He does miracles. Now, some of those miracles, um, Elijah and his disciple Elisha will see being duplicated by Jesus, but all that takes place during the period of kings. Uh,
Okay. Thank you.
Ultimately, the temple is destroyed. The periods of kings comes to an end. Lasts hundreds of years, comes to an end. People are sent out to Babylonia, and now the Persian king Cyrus is the one who brings them back.
Thank
Good.
you. Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, so next week, I want to talk about Shavuot a little bit because it is coming up next. It'll begin next Thursday night. Um, and I want to talk specifically also because we've been looking at Haftorahs. I want to look at the Haftorah for the first day of Shavuot, which is about as wild as you can get. It's from the prophet Ezekiel and Ezekiel's glimpse of the divine. So we're going to look at that. And if there is time, I also want to look at another Ezekiel passage, which is the Valley of the Dry Bones, which is one of the most famous. So we'll look at that. I'll talk a bit about Shavuot, and we will wind up uh, and take a break now for through the summer. And I intend to continue teaching in the fall, and I hope you'll still be around and join me. What I will teach, I don't yet know. Um, so until next week, I hope to see you all and have a great week. Bye, everybody.
Very much.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Bye. My pleasure.